Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Glenn Rawson, and tonight I am in Edinburgh, Scotland. I was here 2 weeks ago, but we're back again. And we are leading a tour with Fun for Less Tours through the British Isles and having a wonderful time. As I said, right here on the Royal Mile, staying the night. We'll be leaving in the morning and heading down toward York, riding the high-speed train. So lots of fun adventures. If you've got British heritage like England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, you could probably really enjoy a tour like this sometime in the future if you can come. If you can't come, then it's okay. I'll bring the tour to you as much as I can. So before I begin tonight, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. I was thinking about it tonight as I was putting this together. I just want to say thank you to all of you for watching. Whether you're a subscriber, a VIP, it doesn't matter. Thank you for watching and supporting these true stories. And also, thank you for sharing them, sending them out to friends and family. The whole purpose of these stories, is to teach the principles of the gospel. It's in a little tiny way. It's intended to change the world and brighten someone, make them happier, and cause them to have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and try a little harder to be good. That's the whole purpose of what we're doing. So I hope that you have a great Sabbath, and I hope that something that is said tonight will be of benefit and use to you. Just to mention, the book, The Great Rescue of 56, that book is almost here. That's the story of the rescue of the William Martin handcart companies in the late fall and early winter of 1856. That book is almost here. And if you had ancestors in that, you'll want to read it. President Hinckley referred to that as one of the greatest rescues in American history. So we're bringing that story back, and this book is beautifully illustrated. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out at historyofthesaints.org. Now for tonight, if you would, have a prayer in your heart as I share these stories with you that someone will be benefited thereby. First story. Sunday morning, about 9 o'clock in the morning, July 30th, 1837, near Preston, Lancashire, England. Elder Heber C. Kimball stood in the waters of the River Ribble, waiting to baptize candidates who had qualified for that ordinance. A short distance away, he said, were 9 individuals who had asked for baptism. Elder Kimball wrote the following in his diary, quote, "A circumstance took place which I cannot refrain from mentioning, for it will show the eagerness and anxiety of some in that land," meaning England, "to obey the gospel. 2 of the male candidates, when they had changed their clothes at a distance of several rods from the place where I was standing in the water, were so anxious to obey the gospel that they ran with all their might to the water, each wishing to be baptized first. The younger, George D. Watt, being quicker of foot than the elder, outran him and came first into the water." End of quote. That individual, George Darling Watt, became the first Latter-day Saint to be baptized in the British Isles. As Elder Kimball said it, the first to be baptized in a foreign land. Well, he would be the first of thousands to follow in the British Isles. And George D. Watt would go on to accomplish great things for the sake of the kingdom. After baptism, George and his mother, who had been baptized on the same day, they immigrated to Nauvoo, and eventually they made their way to Utah. George served numerous missions at home and abroad, and along the way became proficient in shorthand, sufficient that he worked as a clerk in President Brigham Young's office and a reporter, clerk and court reporter for the Utah legislature. It was George D. Watt who transcribed many of the sermons that would later become the Journal of Discourses. In fact, so much was he trusted that, quote, as a reporter for the church, Watt was at all the important meetings, especially when President Young addressed the people. In the 1850s, Watt did not travel with President Young when he left Salt Lake City, but beginning in 1861, he was at the side of the president on every trip until 1867. Watt gave prayers, preached, reported the sermons, and often wrote brief summaries which were published in the Deseret News. End of quote. Then, something went wrong. May 15th, 1868, George became offended, and he walked out of the office of the first presidency, never to return. The next few years were a struggle of faith, and by 1874, George voluntarily, willingly, began to associate himself with apostates and turned his preaching against the church. He was excommunicated and died out of the faith. As it has been declared by his descendants, pride weakened his strength and ultimately stopped him. Now, I tell this story not to dwell upon a sad story necessarily, but to remind us all of a truth. True it is that Brother Watt won the right to be the first convert in England by being the fastest in a foot race, but he failed to finish that race for eternal life that counted most. As the Apostle Paul wrote in 2 Timothy 4:7, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. End of quote. Let it be remembered, brothers and sisters, let it be remembered that the race of faith to the celestial kingdom, well, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Keep going, keep trying. Second story. If I had a theme to this fireside tonight, it would probably be great ones who have done great things for the kingdom of God on earth, who came from the British Isles. This would be one of those. And some of you've heard me tell it before, but it just keeps coming back to me. The year was 1875. Two missionaries serving in Liverpool, England, happened to be walking home one night when they noticed a young boy standing on a bridge. Thinking he was too young to be out so late, they offered to walk the lad home. The offer was accepted, and the missionaries walked him to his humble home, where they met his mother, Susanna. She was a widow with 4 small children living in poverty. The missionaries and their message were accepted, and the family joined the church. And later that same year, with the help from the PEF, the Perpetual Emigrating Fund, the family left England and came to Utah, where they continued to struggle for their survival. Now, that missionary who had baptized the little boy soon completed his mission, and when reporting his labors, he was heard to say, quote, brothers and sisters, I think my mission's been a failure. I've labored all my days as a missionary here, and all I've baptized is one dirty little Irish kid. End of quote. Well, the missionary returned home and made his home somewhere in Montana. Years passed, many years passed, and somewhere after the year 1933, this former missionary, now an old man, heard a knock at his door. When he opened it up, there standing on the threshold was a distinguished-looking visitor, a small man only about 5'5" tall, but with a commanding voice and presence. The visitor asked if he were Elder so-and-so. The man said he was. The visitor then asked, do you remember having said that you thought your mission was a failure because you'd only baptized one dirty little Irish kid?" And the man said, "Yes." The visitor then stuck out his hand and said, "I would like to shake hands with you. My name is Charles A. Callis of the Council of the 12 Apostles. I am that dirty little Irish kid." What that missionary could not have known in 1875 was that dirty little waif, that Irish kid, would grow to become not only a member of the church, faithful, but an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ and one of the greatest missionaries of the early 20th century. My dear friends, you just don't know. You and I labor daily to do our duty, and sometimes we wonder if we're doing any good at all. Well, this story is to remind us, don't be discouraged. You just never know what great good may come from your simple efforts to love. Next story. August 21st, 1851. Mary Jane McCleve was baptized in the Irish Sea, not far from County Down in the northeastern part of Ireland. She was baptized at night to escape persecution. As her family studied the gospel, the desire to go to Zion, find faith and freedom and a piece of ground all their own, well, that became their dream as well. And finally, by Christmas 1855, the family prepared to make that journey to Zion. Now, for Mary Jane personally, it would be hard to leave family, friends, and the beautiful land of Ireland. True enough. But especially trying for her was to leave behind a sweetheart that she would never see again. Mary Jane and her family made that journey. They arrived in America, and when they came to Iowa City, they bought a handcart and joined the Daniel D. MacArthur Handcart Company and departed Iowa City June 11th, 1856 at 11 o'clock in the morning, bound for Salt Lake City. The glamour of that journey, well, it didn't last. It soon turned into the tedium of an endless trail. If it was not the hot, choking dust, it was the miserable, slippery mud. Nevertheless, Mary Jane's father pulled on with the family, helping him as best they could. As they passed into Wyoming, Mary Jane prayed that she could endure the journey all the way to the end. Oh, how she missed Ireland. Surely the Lord must have a purpose in bringing his saints through this experience, she said to herself. And then the McCleve family passed over South Pass. Again, Mary Jane looked out at the desolate landscape and she thought to herself, quote, "It was such a bleak sight to see that dry sagebrush terrain before us. It looked so forlorn. Oh, for just one view of my beloved Ireland. I couldn't help but wonder," she said, "what we had given up for the gospel. Surely our destination looked better than that, what I could see today. Please, Lord," she said, "help me not to lose faith." Bone weary and worn down, the immigrants pushed on towards Salt Lake. Then just 2 days out of Salt Lake City, Mary Jane's beloved father, John, could go no further. He had pulled his handcart courageously all that way, and he passed away. Mary Jane described her feelings. "We thank the Lord for not letting him suffer, but oh, how I hated to leave him there in that lonely spot. Amid aching hearts and many tears, we buried him by the side of the road and erected a little marker by his silent grave. I loved my kind father, and it was almost more than I could stand to go on without him. That incident seemed to be, she said, a turning point in my life, for I pulled and pushed on that handcart every foot of the way from there on, up and over the mountains toward and into the Salt Lake Valley. Oh, how I worked, she said, with tears streaming down my face, praying for understanding. Why? Why? Was it worth my father's life? Oh, Lord, she said, help me. Now, this story is for you. Any of you who have ever wondered if all the sacrifices made by those pioneers for their faith, was it worth it? Does it need to be remembered? And should it be told? Well, I witness to you that those stories are important. They need to be remembered. Thank God there are still people among us who love their faith and cherish obedience more than life itself because of what they passed on to us. They did hard things. We can too. Mary Jane finally reached that point where she could look down into the Salt Lake Valley, the Zion of God, the city of peace that she and her family had dreamed of for so many years. Mary Jane then said, a calm feeling came over me. I wanted to run down the mountain and reach our journey's end. I was so thankful, she said, for being one of the chosen few. If only Father could have been here to enjoy that sight with us. Maybe he was, she said, for I surely felt close to him that very moment. Our fathers and mothers made great sacrifices to get us to the valley. It's up to us to carry on the legacy that they gave us. Let's take a break for just a second. Again, so many thanks to all of you for listening and sharing these stories. Just to let you know, for those of you that are free subscribers, for those of you that are VIPs, or for any that are just interested, the next book is coming out, a collection of stories from this last year that have been sent out weekly. The Year 6 collection is almost here. Keep an eye out at glenrossenstories.com. That book is almost here. As is the book, Prayer Brings Miracles. The book that so many of you contributed to, that book is almost here. So keep watching. And then there is a third book coming out at glenrossenstories.com. It's a little bit further out, but it will tell the story of the hands of divine providence in the American founding. Wait and see. It's coming. Okay, I need to hook up a power source here really quick. Hold on. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. We have power again. I didn't realize I was getting so low. All right. All right, next story. Again, talking about the great ones from the British Isles. The year was 1850, and missionaries came to the home of William and Ellen in northern Scotland. It wasn't too long before William and Ellen heard the message of the missionaries and believed it and were baptized. Evidently, William's conversion ran deep, and he had great zeal for his newfound faith, so much so that he was ordained an elder and earned for himself the nickname the Black Minister because of the color of his hair and his earnestness in teaching the gospel. He was a good missionary. In time, William and Ellen desired to immigrate to Zion. They made arrangements. They sold their farm, everything they had, and then made arrangements for a ship. But just before they were to leave, their children contracted measles and the voyage had to be postponed. At that time, a friend came to William and asked if he could borrow the money he had received from the sale of the farm. The friend would take that money, book passage to New York, and when William and Ellen came the next year, he would be there with the money waiting for them to go on in their journey. William trusted him and agreed to the arrangement. It was May 4th, 1856, when William and Ellen and their 5 children departed Liverpool, now prepared, bound for New York. 41 days later, they landed at Castle Garden, New York, and to their dismay, when they got there, neither the friend nor the money was waiting for them. He had absconded with the funds they so desperately needed to make that journey on to Iowa City and on across the plains to Utah. The family was stranded. They had no choice but to go to work and now earn enough money to make that journey. It took 2 years, but finally, they made it out to Iowa and then on to Florence, Nebraska, where they were assigned to the company of Captain James Brown, a wagon company. On the eve of their departure from Florence, Captain Brown announced that there was a widow among them in the company, too ill to walk. She also had a small child. Could anyone take the widow in their wagon and provide for her across the plains? Well, William had planned to have his wife Ellen ride in the wagon. He went back that night. I said nothing in the meeting, but he went back that night and related the plight of the widow to Ellen, who answered immediately, "You go right back and tell her she may have my place." William did, and Ellen gave up her place in the wagon to the widow, and Ellen walked the 1,000 miles to Salt Lake City. Now, that story is remarkable enough in itself if it stopped right there, but there's more. It's miraculous and sometimes astonishing in how the Almighty takes the unfortunate and tragic happenings in our lives and turns them into great blessings. And this is one of those. Most of the immigrants who sailed on the same ship with William and Ellen in May of 56 went on to Iowa City and became a part of the tragedy and suffering of the Willie Handcart Company. William and Ellen missed that because of the man who had stolen their money. Many years later, William and Ellen's grandson would look back on his pioneer ancestors, their sacrifices, their accomplishments, and would attribute all that he was and all that he became to them. William and Ellen were William and Ellen Ullman McKay, their grandson, President David O. McKay. Next story. I'm in Scotland. This story started in Scotland. Margaret Kirkwood was born August 9th, 1809, in Kilbarchan, Scotland, and joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints April 1st, 1840. By the time Margaret departed Scotland for America, she had already buried her husband and 2 of her 6 children. Both daughters, Margaret and her boys, arrived in Iowa City June 26, 1856, and became a part of the Willie Handcart Company. Margaret sold most of her precious belongings to obtain money for her handcart and supplies. As Margaret joined up and came across with the Willie Handcart Company, she did so now with her 4 remaining sons, Robert 22, Thomas 19, James 11, and Joseph 4. Some years before, her second son, Thomas, had been injured on the streets of Glasgow and was unable to walk. He was pulled in the handcart across the plains by his mother, a frail, petite woman of only 5 feet in height, and by his older brother, Robert. When winter snows caught the Kirkwood family and the Willie Company along the Sweetwater River in Wyoming, it made an already unbearable burden that much harder. But then came the ordeal of Rocky Ridge. October 23rd, 1856. The Willie Company was forced for their own survival to march 15 miles up and over that awful and exposed summit in the face of a terrible winter storm. With Thomas, the crippled Thomas, in the cart, Margaret and Robert struggled all that day and into the next to reach the camp at Rock Creek Hollow. Meanwhile, the lads, James 11 and Joseph 4, fell in behind to keep up the best they could. When little Joseph could no longer walk, his brother James picked him up and carried him on his back the remainder of the journey. They would not reach camp until the following morning. It is reported that upon reaching camp, James Kirkwood set his little brother down by the fireside. Then James, having so faithfully carried out his task, collapsed and died from exposure and overexertion. Now, what's remarkable about this story, this love like unto Christ himself, is that devotion of 2 older brothers who would labor so long and so hard to carry their younger brothers along. One would live, Thomas, but only for 2 more years, while the other, James, would not. But that story, that family, those brothers live on in cherished pioneer remembrance. Paintings have been done of them. I can't help but think 2 brothers who carried their younger brothers. Where did they learn such love and devotion? Margaret Kirkwood was a mother who somehow and in some way taught her children to take care of each other to the last extreme. What a gift. What a gift. And one more thing that is not generally known. When the Kirkwood family became members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in their native Scotland, Margaret was disowned by her prominent family, fabric designers, and also by her husband's family, the Kirkwood family. Mrs. Kirkwood made the statement many times that if it were necessary, she would go through all the hardships and heartaches again for the gospel's sake. End of quote. What does that tell you? There's something in this church, something that brings men to God that is more precious than pain, more valuable than sacrifice and suffering. To those on the outside, we look like we're crazy. But to those on the inside, we do it all again and more. Last story. The date was June 15th, 1875, in Eddington, England. James was 11 years old and not yet baptized. His father vowed that because this boy had been sick for so long and had missed the ordinance, that if James survived his recent life-threatening illness, that baptism would not be put off any longer. The boy was 11. He would baptize James immediately. And now the boy was well enough. The time had come. The baptism had to be done at night because some of the local residents were so much against the church that they would disrupt the ordinance if done during the day. So shortly before midnight, James's father went out and surveyed the area near the Kennet River Bridge where the service was to be performed. There was no one there. He went back one more time just to be sure. And then James accompanied his father out to the mill race that ran parallel to the Kennet River. His father entered the water, stepped down into the water, and took James by the hand. And then James said, quote, "We were veritably horror-stricken by a combined shriek, yell, scream, howl. I know not how to describe the awful noise, such as none of us had ever heard. It seemed to be a combination of every fiendish cry we could conceive of. I remember how I trembled," he said, "at the awful manifestation, which had about it the sharpness and volume of a thunderclap, followed by an angry roar, which died away as a hopeless groan. The fearsome sound seemed to come from a point not more than 50 yards from us near the end of the great bridge. The night was one of bright starlight, and we could have seen anyone on the bridge, which was built of white stone with low walls. Father was also trembling," James said, "and asked me if I was too frightened to be baptized. I was too much terrified," he said, "to speak. So I answered by stepping into the water, and I was baptized." End of quote. After the ordinance was over, James said his father walked over to the bridge and looked around. There was no one there. Moreover, after checking and inquiring, no one in the community seemed to have heard that awful, quote, blood-curdling shriek. But James said, "We heard it, and we shall never forget it." I said it last week, I'll say it again. The greater an effort we make to do well, to do right, to do the correct thing in our lives, the greater we try to do good, the greater will be the force of the adversary to stop us. This church is the church of Jesus Christ. It is his. And by the way, James E. Talmage, apostle, who wrote the book, Jesus the Christ. My dear friends,